Hi, I'm Dan Roos, founder and chief instigator of Openly Disruptive. We help ecosystem builders build the level up engines that power their ecosystem to success. This video is all about how you can power your innovation ecosystem. And it came from a lot of conversations. I had a lot of people talking about how difficult that is and how some ways to make that a little bit simpler. So what I'm going to show you is you'll see that here in front of me, this is a document camera in front of me that's showing I have these worksheets that I use both with the innovators that work within ecosystems to really quickly, rapidly figure out what they're working on and get to an early product market fit. But it also really works in an extended way to think about how an ecosystem itself can power itself to success. So really simply, there's another video that shows this in more detail from an innovator's point of view, but let's dive into why you would want to do this. Well, so the first thing is, this is, by the way, Odie is the name of the robot in the logo for Openly Disruptive. So this is Odie, and he's saying, how do I build a functioning ecosystem of biotech innovators and early adopters? So he's got this hunch. He's observed that he's got these stakeholders that are in proximity or that there are existing relationships with, and there are these innovators and these early adopters. And how can he help actually make that be a more functional ecosystem? So what does that actually mean? Well, what he's observed is that downstream processing is a bottleneck in the growing bioeconomy. So after you culture the microorganism and you get it to express whatever you need it to do, or whatever you're doing on the biology side, you need to dry that out and you need to turn it into a product that requires all kinds of things and all kinds of steps that are different than the fundamental biologic process. So he's identified that downstream processing is a bottleneck in the growing bioeconomy. He believes that there's better tech out there, but it isn't being scaled. So that maybe it exists in at a undeveloped form, or maybe hasn't been widely deployed, or maybe is in maybe it's not accessible for various reasons. And he wants to help his ecosystem solve this problem of getting this tech to help them advance everything that they're all doing. So this is all based on a theory that we have with Openly Disruptive. That is, innovation communities or ecosystems really have a life cycle. You can find this on our website, or there are other resources on our LinkedIn page or on our YouTube channel to show this. But basically, you start off with all of these assets. So researchers and founders and investors and upstream and downstream partners and all of the ESOs and the other supporters. They're all uncurated. They're out there, but they aren't connected to each other. At some point, they start clarifying and they start finding each other, and some patterns start emerging in it. That eventually some sharp people that are entrepreneurial figure out, hey, we can actually curate this. We can figure out how to accelerate this by finding more people like these people and actually turning these into little clusters. But they're not connected in any way that grows at any scale. Then the ecosystem convener, if they're good at this, they can figure out what is the thing that we could do to actually make it easier for these people to find each other and to start getting some critical mass that could grow into sustainability. Now, eventually, that could be something that could coast because everybody becomes complacent and those relationships start falling apart, and it actually declines. It decomposes back to its original state. But we're talking about how do we get from across these zones right here. And that's what this video is talking about. So I mentioned that we have these worksheets. Use this really quickly to figure out the product market fit. So at the top, you'll see where you're creating new value. At the bottom, we identify what is the uniqueness, or what is the moat that you have, the differentiation, and what is the big job to be done that's going to be solved for lots of people if you succeed. The reason we do this is we want you to turn that early product market fit into a vision that you can use to really talk to and engage a lot of stakeholders. Let's show how this happens. So I've already filled this one out. Odie's already done this, and what we would typically do is this is an hour or two session. that we would use the worksheets on on this pad, but typically my handwriting is atrocious, and so I come back and then I clean it up. So he's going to call this thing Downstream BioPlex. He's got this idea of some kind of centralized service to serve the decentralized bioeconomy. So he says, well, he's going to bring together, the first question is, who are the two people you can best help? So this is where you're creating real new value. And he thinks it's really the emerging biomanufacturers. There's so many of them, and they don't have a way to handle this downstream processing that solves the problem of their end users. And then it's also really the companies that are providing bioservices, those downstream services and those other services in the ecosystem, that they're established companies and they would love to work with more new companies, but it's not yet possible to, because it's just not working out. So he knows he's creating value there. The next thing he does is we say, what are the two unique things that you're going to bring? And he's got a hunch that there's a problem with how you contract these services, and he wants to do a standard contracting package to reduce the friction of procurement. And he also thinks that there's a way to do some curated matching to help these people find each other more efficiently than they already are. And then the last question is, what's the job to be done, or what's the good thing that happens for everybody when you succeed? And he recognizes that, as we talk this out, and this doesn't happen just right out of the things he knows, the innovator or the ecosystem builder knows, but as we talk about this, what we learn is what you're really doing is de-risking new bioproducts that's going to accelerate industry growth. So that's really powerful. It's just a very simple mind map. It's very easy to understand what you're trying to do so that you can push up against it, but it also has the benefit that we can turn this into a Mad Lib. I don't know if you remember doing these as a kid, but we can say for emerging biomanufacturers and these established bioservices company, we're going to use this standard contracting package and curated matching to de-risk new bioproducts to accelerate industry growth. And then that becomes a thing that you can say, oh, now I know I have to have hundreds of conversations to get people engaged with this and to persuade them to participate. And maybe what you want to do is you want to, would you give me an hour with your family office? Because we think that this is an opportunity for your high net worth family office to talk about participating in the bioeconomy and why this would work. And so would you give me an hour to discuss this with your principals? If I'm bringing these emerging biomanufacturers together, these bioservices companies, and the standard package of contracting and this curated matching to de-risk new bioproducts. And so really quickly, what you've done in just an hour or two is you've come up with a very simple way to go out and ask a lot of questions and build your ecosystem. Because really, as we know, when we talk to the innovators themselves, what they're really getting is lessons learned about the marketplace in the first year. They have a hunch, but what they're really doing is they're trying to build those lessons learned. So with that, Odie can go out now, and he's having these conversations. And then we just want to have a way to capture it. And this is kind of a fun way to look at it. And we say that, well, he's really starting from here. So here we are. And really, he's got a hunch and some relationships. Let's just be really honest about that before we look at these other boxes. And then we can say, well, what does success look like? What is the first big sign that, like, hey, you're having success? And he said, well, maybe if you think about it, maybe there's 10 bioproducts that are moving from pilot to early commercial sales based on what we're doing with the Downstream BioPlex. That would tell me that we were actually getting some traction, and that would allow me to build some more awareness and everything. And so then the challenge is go out and talk to some of those emerging, talk to both sides of where you're creating value, those emerging biomanufacturers, talk to some of those bioservices companies, but talk to other people to gradually start understanding, if I'm doing this, what do you see? And you're going to hear opportunities that come up, and you're going to hear about obstacles, and you're going to maybe hear about metrics that people are going to say, how you measure this is going to be really important. Reaching this supply chain resilience is going to be measured this way, because maybe the real issue isn't the bioprocessing, but the bioprocessing in a way that makes sure that if there's a supply chain disruption, that it's not going to wipe out an end user of it. And so he's going to go out and have a lot of these conversations, and the things are probably going to emerge that people are going to say, well, hey, if you think about these opportunities, stop thinking about our region, but think about the thousands of these emerging biomanufacturers all over the place. And maybe you need to differentiate that we're for a specific kind of process, or a particular kind of molecule, or a particular kind of end use. Maybe they say this is a $300 billion market by this time, but that market has got a 10% annual growth rate projected. So that's huge. So we can figure this out. We can service this. This is a lot of growth. Some of the obstacles are, it's not just he might hear it, it's not just the contracting. It's actually the how do you finance it, that that these early companies, they're very they're light on capital, and to give up space on the cap table for things that are development costs is hard. Or maybe the actual one of the other obstacles is the commitment for takeoffs by end manufacturers. So the end user of whatever these bioproducts are might say, hey, until you can demonstrate that you can deliver these kinds of quantities, we're not going to be able to move forward, or whatever. So the amount of takeoffs, the amount that they would want to purchase, we have to figure out how to actually align with that. And you can start thinking about the metrics. And the reason for this is, as you ask these questions, it's just getting really clearer, and it's allowing you to start really drill in on what are the real problems. And so for a person like Odie, it helps him say, oh, it turns out, maybe this is another exercise we do. And you can see these are all meant to be done very quickly in a 1-hour session. This is not meant to be a long consulting sprint, but we can start saying, who are these stakeholders, and do we need to tighten up our definition of these? What are they trying to solve? What do they need to do? What do they need to see in order to know that they're succeeding? What do they say? What are this is a way to really start diving into how they communicate and what they actually need, because maybe you don't really understand as much about them as you thought you did. So Odie might, find that he does this for both these bioproduct manufacturers, but also these services companies, and figures out that there's several subtypes of each one of those. But he also figures out that there's going to have to be some way to solve some of the financing problems, and he starts talking to people that are interested in financing something in the middle, that is between discovery and commercialization. People that would be interested in financing that. And so he's going to be able to use this. Another thing he'll be able to do is he'll start saying, as he starts learning that stuff, he starts hearing that and state, well, what is the actual mechanism that you can use to do this? And so this is where we talk about the level up engine, and you'll see we say ideate it. So you don't know when you start an ecosystem exactly how it is that you're going to accomplish this goal of creating this new value using these resources. So we think about it like an engine. So like in a car, and we know where the car is going. So we're going to bring many more bioproducts to market, and to market scale faster. We know who the passengers are in the car. Who we're trying to bring together are these emerging biomanufacturers and the existing bio services companies. We know that you think that some kind of standardized contract and some kind of curated matching are going to be mechanisms of this engine that actually help accomplish this. But this engine needs it's got a flywheel, it's got some kind of cadence. And so maybe what you start figuring out is let's just start exploring ideas. And this is what Odie does. We start talking about, so if there was financing, if you kept hearing that financing of this development stage is an issue, well, what if you had some non-dilutive financing? So rather than companies having to use capital, use part of their cap table to fund this development stuff, what if there were grants available to solve this problem? And what if that was on a funding cycle? And so you could say every quarter we're going to make these grants available. And so it's de-risking it for the bioservices companies, and it's de-risking it for the bioproduct manufacturer, but that's what you're going to use for it. And so you might start saying, oh, so now we can start thinking about what does this standardized contract need to really look like? And actually, here are here's the terms that needs to have, because you've had all of these conversations with people. You can come up with the terms and what are the qualities of this package, of this diluted package, and you can come up with those, and you can start actually coming up with what are these things, and you go back and you test that with your market. So it's a way to quickly test these things out. We don't need to spend weeks doing this, and we don't need to spend endlessly whiteboard this or anything. We can move forward quickly. And what does that ultimately let you do? Is this is another exercise, and I promise this is the last of the exercises. But it allows you to build a scaling model that really works for you. So if you really think about it, so once again, we know that we've got these emerging biomanufacturers, we've got these established service companies, standard contracting. We know all of those things, and we know that Odie is really starting with, he's got a hunch in a community, but if he can use this, he can get alignment out of this, and that's really powerful. And then we can start saying, so before we start thinking about what's the next thing to do, let's just think about what does big success look like. So when you go from a small community of people to this huge success, maybe what it is we think about it, it's thousands of new bioproducts, reaching market faster. And then what we do is we call this backcasting, and this is if you've ever done anything with foresight and scenarios, you can think about, what is the thing that got you to that level? And well, maybe at that point you were doing it for hundreds of products. And it lets you back into say, well, what were the things that we had to let go of? And at some point you're saying, well, we started with kind of a geographic focus, but at some point we're going to actually have to have a bigger focus than that. We're going to have to see a bigger market. And we think that's actually going to happen because after we got this alignment, what we really realized is we needed to stop just talking. So stop merely talking and start MVPing. Let's start building an MVP of what is this standard agreement and this curated matching. How are we matching these people? And can we show that that's bringing bioproducts to scalable market faster? And so maybe that would be, this is going to result in our first success story. And what that's going to do is that we realize that once we have a first success story, then that gives us a data-based, a data-informed story to really go for, raising the first fund to do this or whatever. So you're able to actually build a roadmap from this. So when we work with clients on this, what's amazing about this is, if you think about it, you just go back through these things, through a series of exercises, and in some cases we do this over a month, just a month. So very quickly get from what does it look like? What is this clarifying market that you're seeing, and how are you going to serve it? How do we start serving it? Let's test the waters. We start testing the waters by building this this vision that's this really shareable vision that we can go out and have a lot of conversations with, open a lot of doors with. That gives us a lot of inputs, a lot of feedback from people that we can use to inform this thing, to even tighten up more on the different stakeholders. It's also a way to look at what are these different elements. That allows us to think about the ideation engine as an actual, what is the program? What is the thing that we actually do? How will we turn this into an operation? And think about scale. And ultimately that lets us answer the question with Odie, not what is he trying to do, but when can he get started? Because now he knows that we can work on this together. He's got a community and he knows who he's going to work with. So this is a little bit shy of 20 minutes of how to think about building your ecosystem leveling up engine. I hope this is useful. If we can help you do this, happy to do that. I can tell you about the part of this that we do is just for a way to get to know each other, and what part of this is how we work together when that time is right. You can reach me on LinkedIn. I'm Dan Roos, DANREUS, or you can reach me by email at dan@openlydisruptive.com. I hope you found this useful. I hope you share it with other people, and please let me know in the comments, or send me an email and let me know what you think of it. Thanks, and have an awesome day.